So, hello, you're listening to Grassroots Takeover. We're here with Barbara Jacobson, and we're here with David Graeber, and we're here with Alison Playford.
Hello.
Hello.
So I should do some intros for everybody. So Barbara Jacobson is an independent benefits advisor, and she works at the Fitzrovia Neighborhood Association, which is where we're doing this recording. David Graeber is professor of anthropology at LSE at the moment, and he's author of Debt, The First 5,000 Years, The Democracy Project, and I just found out recently that he is the first academic to have written academic analysis of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So he started the field of Buffy studies that we're now benefiting so much from. So basic income then, let's start with you, Barbara, because you're one of the big fish in this particular battle.
Big fish?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So basic income, just for people who perhaps don't know what that means, can you explain it and maybe what's going on with basic income right now?
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm part of a campaign around something called European Citizens Initiative. And we're trying to collect 1 million signatures throughout Europe by the 14th of January. So if people if at the end of all this you want to join in with that, the URL for that is sign.basicincome2013.eu. And we're hoping we've at this point we've got over 170,000 signatures throughout Europe, and what's been really fantastic is the way that's built a network around organising for basic income throughout Europe.
Yeah, so this idea about basic income, Mark and I got in contact with you because we were looking into the idea in the first place, because we just think it's such an amazing idea, and it's sort of blindingly simple in a way and sounds sort of impossible. So, and I think sometimes it's easy to assume that people know more about these things than they necessarily do, because there's so much information about so much stuff out there. So just to reiterate, it basically means that everybody in the country gets a certain amount of money, and that's it. It's as simple as that. It's a flat rate, and then so if you work, you get money. Money that you get from working is over and above your basic income.
That's right.
So you don't get in a benefit trap in the same way you have with the welfare state.
That's
now.
right.
And what are the other advantages, would you say, of that kind of system?
Well, what we're hoping for it is that it will free people's creativity, so that they'll have time. I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but I mean, there's a whole generation of musicians and actors in this country who benefited from the dole. Right? Yes, you're raising your hand. Who benefited from the dole between, like after national service was abolished, between sort of the early 60s and the late 90s, really, when basically dole was just means tested. There weren't all these other conditions on it. For me, as a long-time feminist, it also would enable people, particularly women, to do the sorts of things that need to get done, like childcare and looking after other people, without having to, which the market doesn't pay for. I mean, somehow this kind of work kind of goes on, or volunteering, or doing, putting content on the internet, all these things that people do, which are actually contributing to society and keeping us all together somehow, is just something the market just says, we're not interested in. You've got to do that on your own time.
I know.
And, and people are making huge sacrifices, especially, now that we're talking about older people, and there are all these older people that need to be looked after. Who's going to do that?
And the kind of facilitation that it would give to activists, I think, is pretty mind-blowing as well, which
Absolutely.
is one of the reasons why it's probably not that popular in, Tory circles and that kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, in fact, the woman... If you go back, I mean, certainly with basic income goes back to even Thomas More. I'm not utopia, but they were talking, because when it was basically from the time of the enclosures, people were talking about how people who'd been thrown off the land need some other kind of income. And particularly the big person on this one was Thomas Paine with agrarian justice. He talked about how there should be, that younger people in particular and older people should be, given a stipend. Younger people to start out in life and older people to look after them, so that they wouldn't starve in old age. And people like John J.S. Mill.
Bertrand Russell, didn't he have
Bertrand
the idea
Russell,
of the vagabond wage?
He absolutely, He, In Praise of Idleness, I think that was from. And Eric Fromm.
These people are better read than we are.
I'm nodding sagely.
Yeah, Eric Fromm was into it.
Good for him.
Buckminster
I was a big fan
Fuller.
of him,
I don't know if you know Buckminster Fuller. he was very adamant that this whole idea of waged work was just a complete obsolete nonsense.
One of the reasons, there's loads of reasons I'm super excited about this idea. One of them is because I've been doing a lot of work around the work capability assessment recently. When we've been talking with groups, mental health representative groups, disability activism, all this kind of thing, and we're kind of sort of nitpicking around, well, what is assessment and stuff like that. And actually the whole basis for assessing people, can you do this, can you do that, I find it pretty disgusting. And it just sweeps away all of those questions. It's not right that somebody pries into your life to find out how many hours you can sit on a chair for a day and stuff like that. That's not conducive to your human dignity.
Absolutely.
So, it just deals
and no indicator of whether you can actually do any work.
And the basic principle is really reversed, because what they try to tell us over and over again is that people are basically lazy, people will be free riders, people don't want to contribute to society. Therefore, if you leave them to their own devices, they'll just be parasites. But in reality, everything we know, speaking as an anthropologist, implies that that's really not true. Most people left to their own devices do not just want to sit there and do nothing. And in fact, a lot of people, because of the nature of our society, would like to be able to contribute to society in millions of different creative ways that they simply can't, owing to the economic system that indebts them, that dispossesses them, that doesn't give them the means to realize. There's an enormous potential out there of people who want to be able to do something, have a better idea than we could possibly have of what they are capable of. And I think there's a philosophical thing behind it too, which I find very moving, which is about the nature of value. Who is to say what is more valuable? The market is obviously not an indicator of the social utility of work. In fact, there almost seems an inverse principle. The more obviously social benefit comes from your work, the less they pay you.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, it's true. A nurse, it's pretty obvious if there were no nurses, we'd be in trouble. If there were no mechanics, we'd be in trouble. And if there were no telemarketers, if there were no insurance brokers, corporate lawyers, we'd probably be better off. But
we'd certainly be okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an immediate crisis. And so obviously the market is not an indicator of the social benefit of work. And, nobody wants to set up a bureaucracy and decide for us, what the real value of work is. Why not say we all have to decide for ourselves? There is no absolute measure. Give everybody the same and let people decide for themselves what they want to do.
So this all sounds lovely, very beautiful ideas. We're going to stop abuse of people. We're going to facilitate their creativity. But I'm afraid, guys, what you've forgotten is that we're in the middle of this terrible austerity crisis and we have no money and we can't pay for the welfare state. We can't afford to, not let the children in this country go hungry. So if you think you have all this money to give away, what the hell?
Where does money come from?
No, I know, it's just nonsense. Even forgetting all the question of where money comes from, which is one thing, okay, which you can discuss, right? Yeah. But if you look at what they're spending at the moment, whether that's on all these wars, it seems like, whenever there's a war coming up, we always have enough money to do that. Where does that come from?
Yeah, if it comes time to bail out RBS, there's infinite amounts of money.
Then there's the bank bailouts.
70 million on Trident, I think.
Then there's the derivatives market, which is something like $7 trillion, which would pay us all about $20,000 a year in the world.
And then there's the fact that spending money on people who are actually going to spend it actually stimulates the economy far more than those expenses.
Exactly.
If you give money to rich people, it doesn't stimulate the economy very much. If you give it to poor people, every pound you give away is 2 pounds in extra economic activity.
That's right.
Tax.
Well, the tax, that's another. The tax.
Open a can of worms.
Yeah, there's a can of worms. Absolutely. There's a group here called Citizens Income Trust who've been working for about 30 years on the question, and they very much are very keen to stay in with the current tax base. And they've worked out that using the tax allowance, you could give everybody about £10,000 a year. That's in a book called Money for Everyone by Malcolm Torrey, which I do recommend.
Might be a start, obviously.
Which would be a start, yeah. It's just they don't really want to deal with. I mean, there are a lot of people within the basic income movement who are into things like land value tax or speculation taxes, or trying to, I mean, I don't know. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but like the corporation tax, both in this country and the States, was something like 89%. Up until the 60s, all right? And there was...
In the U.S., the highest bracket under Eisenhower was 92%.
That's the thing. It's like all this... It's just got into... Like, the taxes at the moment are basically about punishing people for doing work.
No, I definitely know that. I mean, in the U.S., if you're a writer or an artist, you get paid at the highest bracket. I mean, the very people who would be liberated by basic income are the people with the highest tax burden.
I think that speaks to another thing that I find really exciting about this idea, which is that it gives the lie to so much of the crap that we're dealing with day to day. So actually, it's a way of addressing so many of the issues in neoliberalism. It's a way of addressing so many of the international issues.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
I mean, there's also, one thing that we've been talking about quite a lot within the basic income movement is about its effect on immigration. And how, if everybody were paid globally, this is, of course, if everyone were paid a basic income, then people who wanted to stay in their country and do stuff would be able to. You wouldn't have this kind of brain drain of the educated people from different countries coming out and, because because the US, the Europe and the States very much benefit from the elite in developing countries coming up here. Plus, then this whole thing like with the Filipino hurricane, and I'd work a lot with Filipino ex-nurses and porters and people like that, and just sort of thinking, my God, they've been here for 20 years, they've got family out there, they can't get there. What's going on that they can't actually be with the people they love? And then you've got women here who are looking after other people's kids so that they can support their kids in another country.
Or women here who are going to other countries to take care of kids. I mean, we have like people from the Philippines coming to take care of rich people's kids here, and poor people here going to America to be au pairs. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So you've got this obscene waste of people moving around the world, just for money. But the point is, with immigration...
It's interesting to connect, because I always said in the past that people talk about the intractable problems of global inequality and causing migration and so forth and so on. And I always said, these things could be solved really easily. Let's just imagine we eliminated all border restrictions and anybody could live any place in the world they wanted to. Do you think that the people in rich countries like the UK and the US wouldn't immediately decide it was their priority to figure out ways that people in the Philippines or Nigeria wanted to stay there? You think they wouldn't come up with something? Of course they would. I mean, we'd have a global basic income in no time. The problems would take care of each other.
I was going to bring that up because I saw you in a TED Talk saying that. So you got there for it.
You see, everybody knows what I'm going to say. Okay, I got a new one. This is what I did in Switzerland when I was talking about basic income. I was saying, well, why aren't there any amazing new bands anymore? When I came here, I was kind of shocked. London, UK in general has.
You're not saying you don't like the band scene in London.
There's a few good ones, but nothing. It's not like there's amazing new phenomena that
not like
the
it
world.
was when I first came here.
Well, ever since the early '60s, there's been wave after wave of amazing bands that sort of swept the world and redefined music periodically. Starting with Beatles, The Clash, whatever there's nothing of that stature quite anymore that I can see. Why is that? Well, I asked people, what's going on? I was expecting to find out all this stuff I didn't know about this amazing music, and they said, they got rid of the dole. It's the work requirements.
Yeah.
And every single one of those bands was on relief. I mean, the reason Cockney rhyming slang rock and roll was the way you talk about what meant the dole.
Yeah.
I mean, because they were all on the dole. Some of them were named after the dole, as we all know.
UB40,
UB40.
So many of them were living in squats as well.
A lot of them were living in squats as well. So eliminating the squats and eliminating the dole means there's no more new bands. And think about the waste of human resources. I mean, we probably have people out there who could have been Joe Strummer or John Lennon, who are now doing some stupid menial job because a moralist doesn't want to give him money. I mean, who's actually benefiting from this? Nobody. It's
well, it's also it's all the problems we can sort out as well. I mean, you think of all the minds at the moment in the city who are thinking about quants, and they're thinking about derivative contracts, and they're thinking about, and half of those people trained as physicists.
Right.
And where the hell are we at the moment?
And that's why we don't have flying cars.
Indeed. We want flying cars. That's
Exactly.
what we want.
I think that's true. We want to have. I mean, think of all the inventions that we could have. I mean, because all the.
I mean, at the time, I mean, people became musicians at the Dole because there wasn't really the technology that there is now. But you think, like, with the technology now, what people could be doing, all right, to sort out some of the problems we face, it's phenomenal, really.
Well, one of the signs of the health of a society is that they have some use they can put to their sort of impractical, oddball, eccentric, creative people. In a way, in the 19th century, like, there was no dole, but most of the patents, UK came up with, like, Great Britain came out with more patents than anywhere, more inventions, but almost all of those were these sort of like eccentric vicars or people. They found some way to give them some job where they would support them, and they sat around like doing their perpetual motion machines or studying insect life, and probably 2/3 of them were crazy, but 1/3 of them came up with something. And in a sense, what we're essentially doing is doing this on a mass scale.
Yeah.
That's what made Great Britain the industrial powerhouse that it was in the 19th century, oddly enough. If there's a way to commit social suicide, is to take all those people who could be the great musicians, the great scientists, and enslave them until, when a society has nothing to do with its odd but impractical people, it's essentially strangling itself and destroying itself, which is what our society is doing today.
Yeah.
And this would be a way of opening it up. I mean, economically, it just in terms of any form of value that like we ultimately consider important, it would unleash things that we could probably not possibly imagine.
No, that's the thing. It's also
technologically, philosophically, culturally, musically, artistically, in every possible way.
Yeah.
But you say, Barbara, that that basic income goes way back to these thinkers of the past that you mentioned that we haven't read, and also
that's because you don't have time.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I've had 30 years to study questions.
So we're victims as much as everybody. But what I was sort of coming to was that, and also even in recent times, I mean, there's a load of movement around the world, and particularly around Europe and now in the States, about basic income and things. But mainly the activist groups.
Canada.
Sorry?
Don't forget Canada.
Canada's
actually been farther ahead on this stuff than
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yep.
That's okay.
Shout out to Canada there, pioneers. The campaigns that I often sort of work around and things like UK Uncut, and their main argument is kind of, well, obviously austerity is rubbish because we have tax havens and tax avoidance and things, and you have the People's Assembly campaign and all of that, and they're sort of saying, well, we need to get this government out of power, and we need to, have a new Labour government. You're not supposed to laugh.
Oh, right. Very important.
Right. Sorry about that. But the point is, there's not, from my perception, I could be wrong, there isn't many loud voices apart from yourself and things who are saying, basic income, screw all this means testing and, trying to save the meager benefits that were granted us before. Let's go straight through and have something better. I mean, what is it, because it challenges the ideology or the conversation so much?
Well, it challenges the whole work ethic, really. And that, I mean, the Labour Party's very invested in that. Unions are very...
one few element of Labour that they still have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that you have to do it.
Yes.
Or else you're not. But then, they don't really, while there's a lot of what's the word? There's a lot of lip service paid towards, say carrying work, for example. They don't really talk about how the fact that the market doesn't really pay for carrying work properly. And so therefore we've got to figure out something else. I think in this country, that a lot of the problem is that we have been doing anti-cut stuff for like 30 years. I mean, since Thatcher got in, practically. And I think it's like a habit. So it's difficult, to be fair to people. I think it's very difficult to then, when you've been in this kind of stance for that long, to then think, oh, I can relax and I can think about something else.
Right, and
you know?
the instinct becomes, oh, well, the right will turn it into something, they'll use it. If we change anything, they're going to use it as a way to, and I've heard people say that. I mean, it's true that Milton Friedman was into basic income too, because he thought it was a way to destroy social programs.
Income tax, which is different, which I can go into.
Okay, that's important.
I don't want to go into.
But it is significant nonetheless. That, like, the only politician I know right now who's openly supportive of basic income is Skidelsky, Baron Skidelsky, and he's a Tory.
He's a politician.
Well, he's in the House of Lords.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, he's for basic income and debt forgiveness.
That's the thing. No, so I started to say, like, after the World War II, there was a Tory lady whose name is escaping me right now. I think it's Janet something or other. And she's on Twitter somewhere. Sorry about this. But she had an alternative proposal to Bevins. All right, Bevins was the creator of the contributory welfare state, where you suppose you have this kind of fiction of contributing to it for 30 years and then you get your money back. I mean, of course, the economics have never really worked that way. It's always been the generation that's working, paying taxes, that actually pays for pensions. So that's a bit of a myth. But she was a Tory lady, and she felt very much, her main focus was to get rid of poverty, and she actually suggested a basic income at that time. And there are a lot of, the Green Party has it in their manifesto, although they won't talk about it very often.
Really?
Yeah.
And a friend was saying to me yesterday, actually, that it's a very popular topic with lots of think tanks, and he's heard it a lot.
Yeah, no, the Adam Smith Institute came out with an article a few weeks ago about how fantastic it is, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a potential there. I mean, I think it's true. The left has just sort of abandoned, the institutional left has just abandoned the idea of any kind of visionary politics.
Yeah.
They're afraid of vision.
Yeah.
They think vision will go out of control.
It's somehow unrealistic. I mean, there's been this whole kind of meme since Blair, basically, that we have to be realistic, and now it's, I don't know how other people feel, but I certainly feel like the system we've got at the moment is extremely unrealistic.
The system is obviously unviable. I mean, and if you talk to members of the elite, like, those of them, probably 5 to 10% of them who actually do care about the long-term viability of the system, they're terrified. I mean, they know this isn't working. They know it's hitting, like, any number of different walls simultaneously, and they're willing to, like, listen to almost anybody. So there's a sense out there that if you make a plausible case for something radically different, I mean, I've had people talk to me very seriously about debt cancellation, people in very high places, and essentially admit that it's going to happen. It's a question of how. And if they're talking to me at all, they must think they're in trouble.
Desperation.
Yeah, I mean, come on. This would be like, Rothschild calling up Kropotkin or something.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these activist groups and campaigns, they must, I don't mean to sort of suggest that they don't, this isn't in their vocabulary, basic income and things, but they probably make a tactical decision.
But it's seen as something, like long term. We have to fight the real cuts now, and
once we get the ball rolling in the other direction.
Once we get that rolling, then therefore, but then see, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm a bit of a veteran of all this stuff, and for me, I just sort of, when I heard about this European Citizens Initiative and some of the organizing around it, I fell on it like manna from heaven, all right, because I'm really, really fed up with fighting cuts. I mean, we just,
what the left doesn't understand is it's the side that's putting out the crazy stuff that wins. Always. You know who's winning because they're the ones putting out even more extreme, unrealistic versions of their ideals. I mean, that's the right doing.
But it's also the thing, I mean, to be fair to the wages, they always had this thing of, we'll ask for everything and you'll get some of it. And I think certainly with basic income, that's sort of my personal strategy is that, well, if we ask for everything, we want it unconditional, we want it enough for people to live on. I mean, you're talking about doing something about democracy. I mean, one of the things that really enlivens the people in the European movement is the whole question of democracy and the fact that, it's impossible to really participate in society unless you have enough to do so, enough time, enough money. All right. I mean, I remember being a student and I only had about £5 a week to live on, and I couldn't go out for drinks with people, so I had no social life. All right, so
And also security.
yeah,
I mean, you can't really participate democratically in your community unless you have some idea that you're going to be in the same place, that you're going to
Exactly.
have a fairly stable situation.
That's
And then you
right.
can think about larger questions.
Yeah.
I'd like to see all the grassroots groups talk about this and get involved in it. I think it's occupied to the bone as a concept, is my feeling. I think it would be a really exciting thing to see UK Uncut get involved in. I think Deepak Disabled People Against Cuts, it's like really speaks to a lot of the stuff that they're doing. I think a load of us students, housing campaigners, I think it helps.
I mean, the way the students let
everybody.
the grant go, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm told that it was a kind of bait and switch that Blair did. You know, he was kind of elected in '97, and within weeks they got rid of the student grant.
Because if there's a way to turn the sort of neoliberal worm around, I mean, that's like the first place I think we can reverse it. You know, because a movement away from free education has been just a completely failed experiment. It's been a disaster, and according to every account. It's destroyed the quality of the education. Economically, it's been worse than the situation that came before. It's a failure on all accounts. So
I think you described, I think it was neoliberalism, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you described it as a war against the imagination.
Yes, indeed. I did say that. And that's why they went after the universities, because the universities are the kind of place which fosters the imagination. It's the sort of place where alternatives are going to come out of. And especially after 2008, they pretty much had run out of arguments for the viability of the system. I mean, they used to at least say, like, we understand economics. And it turns out they don't even understand their own financial derivatives. So there was complete failure across the board of the neoliberal projects. The only thing they have left is to go viciously against any place that an alternative idea might come out of and submit it to market logic before it can. I mean, that was the reason they went after the universities. And I think that there's a recognition that it just didn't work. It was a disaster. And we have an opportunity to start things moving in the other direction. And I think that free education should be an immediate demand, but the basic income should be our real horizon, because it's not unrealistic. It can be done. The economics is there.
Well, let me throw a counter argument at you, but I know you have an answer for it. So it's
the best kind of counter argument.
Exactly. It's all a setup, you know. Got
Throw her a
the
softball. Come on.
Exactly. Well, because in some places they refer there's a name debate going on. You call it basic income, call it unconditional income. In some places,
Social wage.
Yeah, social wage. But one of the names is citizens' income, and you know, and the discussion kind of starts to take a turn where people say, well, okay, well, how do you define a citizen? And you know, and there's a worry that okay, this sort of demand or reform will provoke a kind of racist, you know, use of this kind of thing. But you're taking a different tack, a human rights tack, aren't you? With basic income. So
no, we're definitely
that.
going for basic income as a human right.
So you're in the UK. It doesn't matter what your status is or whatever. I'm trying to think of what people are going to throw.
If you're a person, you get basic income.
Okay. That's
but I mean this. I can understand, like, say, why the Citizens Income Trust, they changed their name from, I think it was Basic Income Research Group. I think it was Basic Income Research Group initially. And they said they changed it to Citizens Income because they reckon, because they want to stay within the current tax base, they felt they couldn't really provide, what they were doing wasn't going to really provide people with a full basic income, you know, with a full income to actually live on. But they feel very much that even having a smaller amount of money, if it's regular and it's secure, would be a great benefit. They point to things like the dividend in Alaska, where the oil dividend in Alaska, where people get, I don't know, $300, something like $300 a month, which of course they can't live on, but it's a very popular benefit. And, you know, and it's just, I mean, I know sort of, I mean, certainly from my perspective, doing benefits advice, even, and also having been very poor, it's you know, and also been freelance and everything else, having even a small amount of money, which is regular, and you can count on, and which you don't have to sort of go scraping to some bureaucrat for, is huge. You know, it can be a really huge factor just to be able to plan Because the thing is, it's almost impossible for people to plan when you're on that level.
Yeah.
And
the amount of paperwork, I mean, I think we need to think about
Yeah.
the amount that's going to liberate people's time, because, being poor is actually a full-time job. Being broke
Absolutely.
is a full-time job. The amount
Yeah.
of paperwork, the amount of time you have to spend going from office to office, proving things, all that would be eliminated, and the
Well, the
time would
amount
be
of time you
liberated
have-
to something socially productive, potentially. And
Absolutely.
even people who don't do, aren't going to be doing, like, producing less than they were when they're just running from office to office all day.
But it's even just the amount of time you
things that we
spend.
couldn't possibly imagine what they might be doing.
I mean, I remember, the amount of time I used to spend just dealing with food. All right, just trying to find the cheapest place to get food, dealing with the food once I got, all the things around food and trying to get it, and I was shopping like every day because like I'd be one place and that would be the cheap place to buy butter, and then somewhere else would be the cheap
research. It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
Being unemployed is a full-time job.
Absolutely. It's, there's a lot of, there's the bureaucracy aspect. There's also just the aspect of how you survive being poor or not having enough money, basically. And that is also really huge.
The idea is something I think...
And the amount of paperwork, I mean, I think we need to think about the amount that's going to liberate people's time, because, being poor is actually a full-time job. Being broke is a full-time job. The amount of paperwork, the amount of time you have to spend going from office to office, proving things, all that would be eliminated, and the time would be liberated to something socially productive, potentially. And even people who don't do, aren't going to be doing, like, producing less than they were when they're just running from office to office all day.
But it's even just the amount of time you spend...
that we couldn't possibly imagine what they might be doing.
I mean, I remember, the amount of time I used to spend just dealing with food. All right, just trying to find the cheapest place to get food, dealing with the food once I got, all the things around food and trying to get it, and I was shopping like every day because like I'd be one place and that would be the cheap place to buy butter, and then somewhere else would be the cheap
research. It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
Being unemployed is a full-time job.
Absolutely. It's, there's a lot of, there's the bureaucracy aspect. There's also just the aspect of how you survive being poor or not having enough money, basically. And that is also really huge.
The idea is something I think, forgive me if they have, I'm not sure if anybody's mentioned so far, is the impact that this would have on homelessness. I mean, are we basically saying we would have no homeless people? Or, I mean, that's a revolution. That's a miracle. No homeless people. That's like the best thing ever. Like, wow, that's,
Not just for the homeless people, for all the people who live in fear of it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and child poverty, the impact that this could have on child poverty, it's just, it's actually a mind-blowing thing.
Well, that's the thing, that goes back to child benefit, all right? Child benefit is basically only conditional on having a kid, or at least until a few months ago, it was only conditional on having a kid. It wasn't means tested. It was a very popular benefit. There was no fraud. You do your one shot, you put your application in saying that you've got a kid, they, with the birth certificate to prove it, and then you get child benefit until they're 16 or 18.
Yeah, and I think that
And I know people who lived on that. I know people who lived on that. So anyway.
And another thing that I think is really important is that it restores a certain essential concept of the dignity of humanity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, are there children who do not deserve to have a home or do not deserve to have food? I mean, none of us would agree in the abstract that they don't, yet somehow we've produced a system that tells them they don't. It's this incredible form of violence. And just to sort of establish, if you are a human being, yes, you deserve certain basic things, is a way of reestablishing a sense of who we are as people, all of us, that has been lost and has been, it hasn't been lost, it's been attacked and systematically destroyed. I mean, people's very sense of themselves as human beings has been under assault for 30 or 40 years. And this would start to turn it the other way, establishing in no uncertain terms that if you are a human, you cannot be entirely undeserving.
And that's the thing is, they always talk about empowering people. Well, this is a way of really empowering people, that they can actually start making their own decisions about their lives and start participating in things that they may not have been able to before.
Yeah, I mean, money is power. Money is freedom. I mean,
Yeah.
money is the freedom to get on a train and visit your relatives. Money
Absolutely.
is the freedom to,
Yeah.
decide to work on a project. I mean, essentially, we are distributing freedom to human beings directly.
And the kind of stress reduction it would cause and the way that could reduce abuse in domestic terms, all that kind
Absolutely,
Oh,
this
yeah.
worked in Canada. I mean, that's what we haven't actually spoken about. Is there's been quite a few pilot studies,
And in India as well.
And in India, there's been one in Namibia recently.
Oh, I heard about the Namibia one. Yeah.
Yeah, and Brazil, they're sort of slowly trying to introduce it. They've introduced it with poorer people at the moment. But
So what kind of things are we seeing from these studies then? Is there
One of the really interesting things about the Namibia study that I remember is that it had an effect of immediately increasing grassroots democracy. Is what communities did was they had everyone take half the money and put it in a communal pool, and then they would have collective meetings to decide how to allocate it for various projects of sort of general benefit. So people kept half of it to support themselves, and the other half became spontaneously became a mode of creating and deepening grassroots democracy.
Oh, and they did something that the aid agencies never thought of.
Which
Was
is
they built a post office?
That's right.
Yeah,
These people
no, which
know
I
their needs better than you're ever going to know. I mean, yeah.
They needed a post office, but the aid agencies, because they're focused on.
Would ever thought of that?
Yeah. And the other thing that people find, that the pilot studies found, at least in Namibia and India, was that people actually set up more of their own little enterprises. Selling stuff. They were actually more, traditionally economically active than they were before, because they had actually and that's another big sort of demographic that support basic income are small business owners, because they know very well, first of all, how much their families help them out. All right, that's a lot of free work that goes into any business starting out. And also just the vagaries of the economy, that there'd be a cushion, they would be able to keep themselves going. A, people would be spending more, and B, they themselves would have some kind of they would have some kind of something to fall back on, basically, if their business happens to hit a dip. It's not all. I mean, another thing that another sort of demographic or whatever that keeps coming through the door, recently has been coming through the door, are women who are just short of retirement age, who've lost their businesses. They've gone under for whatever reason. All right, sometimes it's maybe a bad decision somewhere along the way. I mean, as somebody was saying, or bad luck, or somebody, or just things are just going, because of the downturn, they're not making so much, and they lose everything. They lose their houses, they lose their families, they lose their business, and now they're in a hostel after, years and years of working and trying to build something up.
Well, supporting small businesses with it. I mean, you could imagine a society, a future society where you walk down the street and there's actually a diversity of business, where you don't just see Nero, Starbucks, and whatever else, and they're selling things that maybe aren't just the absolute guaranteed selling product. They're selling things that might
take a risk.
That's the thing, is you can, people would be able to take a risk with ideas, and then they'd be able to try stuff out without thinking, right, well, if this fails, then I'm back to
the
square
nature
one.
of experiments that sometimes they don't work.
Yes, and some of the best experiments are the ones that don't work. I mean, some of the most useful ones are the ones that don't work. So,
see, when I mentioned basic income and things like that to the people I'm in circles with and activist circles and stuff, quite often they throw the potential objections and pitfalls, there is the whole thing of how it could be used as a racist thing, and how do we define who's a person and whatnot, and and all there's economic difficulties, how are we going to dig the money from this, and how are we going to make that relate to other European countries or whatever, and all these kind of technicalities. But I suspect really that what they're really worried about is just the premises that it challenges, the work ethic, how we define a person, what's socially useful work, all that kind of thing, and to have an objective that just face front just rams up all against those things, to me is the exact reason to pursue it, rather than to think, okay, well, let's go for the smaller option that we can maybe fit into the narrative.
There's a basic problem, I think, the left and work that we've got to face up with, because over the course of the 20th century, the sort of acceptable socialist left was wedded to the idea of work as a value in itself, and work was seen as a value in itself because it was socially productive, and all value comes from work. But there's been a gradual attack on that idea of work as being the source of all value. They've sort of destroyed that in people's heads. They've kept up the idea that work is a value in itself, which is why you have all these people working jobs that don't do anything, but they still feel they have to work more and more and more, because working is the only thing that makes you...
all this mythology that somehow, and this is quite prevalent in the charities, that, you're better off if you're working.
Yeah, I mean,
you're always better off if you're working, and it doesn't seem to matter than what you're doing.
yeah,
or
and
who
there's
you're
jobs
doing
not
it
worth
for.
doing, and that you'd
Yeah.
be much better off doing nothing at all.
Well, it's interesting because the
Well, there are a lot of people I'd like to see doing nothing at all.
I
actually.
think, well, a lot of them are in very high places. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Isn't it bizarre and sort of ironic that one of the big defamations thrown at people involved in political activism just to give them a slap in the face,
Get a job. Yeah.
get a job, exactly. You know,
Right,
so-
whereas I was always trying to think, what's the best comeback for that? And it's not very snappy, but basically...
You're listening to David Graeber. He's going to give you the best comeback to the get a job comment. David, over to you.
Why don't you get a job that's actually does some good for somebody?
Ooh,
Okay.
drum roll. We're assuming this isn't a nurse who says this.
It never is somehow.
No, it's always-
That's the
yeah,
interesting
no, that's
thing.
the
It's
thing.
never the pastry chef, the street sweeper who says that. It's always the guy in the suit who turns out he's like a financial consultant or a human resources advisor, telemarketing research administrator, somebody who basically doesn't do anything.
You do get that thing thrown at you from the more come on a garden people though, and I was I think so. And,
Occupy Wall Street was always the suits.
well, you were in Wall Street, but
But no, there's a lot of construction people and cooks and people like that there too.
But I was trying to sort of ask myself about this when you get a person who's probably open to these kind of ideas, probably wants change, probably really frustrated, but they see people doing things like political activism or stuff that's maybe not immediately understandable or challenges what's going on, and they respond with this sort of unpleasant reaction. Oh, get a job or something. And I was trying to figure, where's this emotional pain coming from? Is it that when people feel they're being exploited and screwed, they have to sort of direct that energy somewhere, and they see people doing things. I don't know if I'm going off on a
I
complete
think
tangent.
if people have put a lot of time, effort, and struggle into doing
Yeah, I
something,
mean, it's asking
why
a
the
lot,
hell
so-
shouldn't you have to do that as well? I've made all this sacrifice. You should have to make it as well. Well, there are alternatives. That sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the people who say, I paid back my loans, like, why should you get off? I paid off all my student loans. I mean, the way I feel about it is, that's like saying, I got mugged, therefore everyone else should.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
nonetheless, it works on some people. And, I had to discipline myself. But it's partly because they internalize that idea that suffering makes you a better person. That, if you don't submit yourself to some kind of imposed work discipline, if you're not doing something you don't actually enjoy, then you're somehow not a decent human being. That's sort of necessary to go through to become a moral person. And I think that's the first, one of the things we really have to fight, because one reason I wrote the book on debt was because the idea that, if you don't repay your loans, what you borrowed, you're a fundamentally bad person. People really do buy that. That's one of the major ideological forces working to prop up the system. And there aren't that many at this point. And the idea that people who don't do some kind of work that they don't like under some sort of imposed discipline, either self-imposed or imposed by a boss, just are bad people and are undeserving, is the other one. Now, those are the two main pillars of the system. And I think what we need to do is to start talking about work not in terms of the value of just working itself, but what that work produces. I mean, there's a lot of people who work really hard and produce negative social value. The world would actually be much better off if they weren't doing that. There's other people who don't get paid at all and are producing enormous social value. The amount you get paid has nothing to do with the degree to which you're actually benefiting other people. And one thing I found over and over again about people who supported us in Occupy in America was that feeling of injustice, that people say, I don't want to do a job that doesn't benefit people. I want to do something. I want to be a teacher. I want to be in education. I want to be in health. I want to be in something that provides an actual social benefit to other human beings. But if you do that, you get paid so little and you end up so much in debt, you can't even take care of your own family.
Yeah.
And the fundamental injustice of that, the people who actually are determined to provide value, it's as if being allowed to do something that benefits others is a kind of reward.
Yeah.
You have to get rich and then you could do charity.
Yeah.
Or if you want a job where you're being nice to people, that should be a enough in itself. What you want, like a nice house and benefits too? That's ridiculous. And that attitude is the very thing we need to reverse, I think. And I think that basic income is a real way to do that, is to say that left to their own devices, people will do things which will help others, and they should be rewarded directly for that. And we're not going to measure it, because who can? But we trust you to measure it yourself.
You want to say something?
Here. No, excellent.
So so Barbara, you're in the midst of trying to get a massive amount of signatures for a petition, and the petition is going to the. Can you explain it?
To the EC, it's going to the European Commission, and what it's asking them to do is to look at a form what we call emancipatory welfare as basic income, and how best that could be done to run pilot studies and to do looking at it and to debate it in the EC. Which is, again, just a really small step towards it, but it's been quite surprising in the last sort of 8 months what a kind of movement it's
Well, you were saying when we spoke before that with or without the petition, the focus on it has created this whole sort of international network of people looking at it and sort of talking to each other. And...
Yeah, no, it's something that hasn't. I mean, basic income was last sort of politically spoken about in the late 70s. Basically, that's when the three
last period of a fundamental crisis and the global capitalist system, much as we have today.
Indeed, yes. So
we went in one particular direction at that point.
So things like the 3-day work week, which the unions have completely given up on. That went, and also the Liberals, and they had they had a citizens' basic income in their manifesto in 1978.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and in fact, even the Lib Dems had it in their manifesto up until 1996. So, it really, this whole thing of what David was saying about the attack on the imagination, I think is really true. And we're hoping that we start the debate. I mean, obviously, well, we're not even hoping. We know we've started the debate off again, and we're very happy about that. So if you're a European citizen and you want to sign the ECI, the European Citizens Initiative on Unconditional Basic Income, it's SIGN.basic income, BASICIM. No. Anyway, Basic Income 2013.
We'll put a link.
Link it on
on the YouTube and all that kind of stuff.
Sorry, yeah.
But other than that, talk to people about it. Type it into the internet.
So even if you disagree with it, sign it, because it'll prove you right if you really believe that you're right.
Yeah, we'll get the debate going.
Yeah. Yes. Everybody get behind this idea. Everybody have a think about it. Think about how much. I mean, we've talked a lot through the sort of things that this could impact and the sort of change that it could bring, and I hope that speaks to a lot of people. And I hope it's something that we can, really get together around. All sorts, I was saying earlier, all sorts of different groups. I hope we can really get together around it. And also, my feeling is this is something that's going to come. It's just one of those things. It's part of the process. It's coming.
Yeah, it's like debt forgiveness.
It's going to come.
Why should we wait? Let's push on with it.
Let's get on with it. You know what I mean? Let's do it as fast as we can.
Let's leave the world again.
It's so me and Alison are going to try as hard as we can to get Occupy into it, charging straight away with it. But just talk about it, learn about it. Get involved if you can. We'll call it the revenge of the imagination.
There you go.
Hey,
beautiful.
Love that.
Oh, that's a good phrase.
So
call this radio show that.
Mark has a thing that he wants to Occupy to do a campaign of scrap the welfare state on the basis.
I like these provocative things. As an anarchist, I'm opposed to representative democracy. As a person for basic income, I want to scrap the welfare state.
Right.
All this kind of stuff. But I'm on the left.
Yeah, in the Cops Off campus, we had our manifesto called "The University is Dead."
Yeah. But this is the thing. I mean, that's what Federici talks about, all right, in terms of the welfare state, is the fact that it really destroyed all those mutual help that people were giving each other, all right? And it's not that, yes, of course the welfare state was a victory in many ways. However, it also, there was the downside, was that it kind of stopped people from working with each other and helping each other. Okay, so now, it's like the older people that I work with, they're having to hire people to look after them, and
precisely.
And they're not. And
I went to
crazy.
Sweden once. Met a whole bunch of Swedish anarchists, and coming from America, where Sweden is always represented as a sort of socialist paradise. I was always Swedish anarchists. I wonder what they're going to have to say. And I thought what they said was really interesting. What they basically said, almost all the institutions of the Swedish welfare state were not created by the government. They were created by workers' associations, sort of mutual insurance groups, everything, even the public library system, everything was created through the labor movement, through social movements. And essentially, the welfare state is a kind of social truce in the class war. And it's seen explicitly as such. The anarchists are always accused of violating the social peace. The idea is like, well, yes, there is a war between the government and the people. We've declared a truce and hostilities for the last 50, 60 years by giving you this deal saying, okay, you can have all these institutions that you created, but you can't run them.
Right.
We're going to run them, and we'll let you, and then we'll systematize them and regularize them and bureaucratize them. But, the thing is what the government runs, it can also take away. And that's precisely what's starting to happen there. But it is a truce. It's a truce and a war. And now they're the ones who broke the pact. We're at war again, and we need to start thinking of it that way.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave it on that rather call to action note. So thanks to Barbara Jacobson of Fitzrovia Neighbourhood Association and David Graeber of London School of Economics and Occupy Wall Street and various other collaborative groups. And so bye from me and Alison Playford for now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.